Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us and welcome to Ad Age Remotely. I'm Janine Poggi, Senior Editor here at Ad Age, and today I'm joined by Marcus Stephenson, VP of Digital Marketing and Programming at Washington Football Team. Hi, Marcus.
Hello. Hey, great to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. Happy to have you.
Yeah, it's great. It's great.
So
lots of things going on.
Certainly lots of things going on. But before we get started, for those of you watching at home, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them on our social channels, and we will try to get to them during the broadcast. So the team formerly known as the Redskins is in the process of rebranding itself following years of criticism over its name being racially charged. Last week, it launched a new website that promises to bring fans along for the ride and asks for input on potential team names. Marcus, can you explain a bit about the marketing you're doing around the team?
I mean, absolutely. So the change was a necessary change as we move forward as a franchise. We have a new era both on the field and off the field, and we want to take our fans, our community, and our partners, along on the ride. As we rebrand what we're really doing. And so part of those efforts is WashingtonJourney.com, where we design it as a destination or a hub to where we're bringing in fan input on that journey. And so we've seen everything from fan submissions from a color scheme perspective to logos. And part of that is the whole inclusive nature that we're really looking forward to building with our fans as we move forward into that new era. And so the big emphasis on this and this new branding process for us is to make it open. Okay. And when we do that, when we open it up, everyone can give their input. So it's a really collaborative decision towards an identity. It's not just a brand to us, it's an identity. And when we're building that, we really need to draw from all angles here.
Aside from, accepting input from fans, what else does transparency mean in this respect? What else will you be letting fans in on as you go through this journey?
So the transparency is both, I like to describe it in the office as like push and pull. Okay, so we're opening up really from a marketing and branding perspective, our color schemes, our designs, our blueprints. And that's what you're going to see on WashingtonJourney.com every day. We're going to constantly have updates. We're charging ourselves with every day. And then what we're then going to have is that fan submission aspect. We're going to publicize and show the submissions that fans are having. And while we can't guarantee that we're actually going to pick one of those submissions, we believe that when we open up that process and we make it a two-way conversation back and forth, now our fans can be both provide input, but then also they can provide, what their opinion and point of view is on how the evolution of the brand is moving along.
Have you received submissions yet?
Tens of thousands of submissions so far.
And so in the past week, you've received tens of thousands.
Absolutely. And it's everywhere from your AMC Mad Men style pitch, where it's to just recommendations onto the name, to heartfelt letters. We've received submissions of course, some of the names that are out there, Red Wolves, Red Tails, but then also people loving Washington Football Team, especially as we showed pictures and debuted videos of our helmet scheme and our uniforms. But we've also heard some people really backing ones that are obscure in nature, but that's part of what we wanted to show on WashingtonJourney.com, the Washington dinosaurs, for instance. And a fan actually put together an entire logo scheme, an entire color palette, and then really, a full-scale concept statement that you would see in an actual brand pitch.
So you're talking about really professional level submissions as well, along with, some, less so, but definitely you're getting professional style pitches here, as though you went out for an RFP on this.
Yes, exactly. It really feels like that. And some have really taken it seriously. So it feels very good, because if people are giving their heart and soul into that, that's success for us, because we're able to open it up and show them that, especially when we use our platform to show what they're doing, the transparency then is just there right out in full view for everybody.
Is there any chance you'll just keep the name, Washington football team? Obviously, there are plenty of other teams that are known by their locale. Is that still on the table?
That's absolutely on the table, but it's if people want that. And that's what I want to stress here, is that this evolution and part of that inclusive nature is going to be a collaborative decision towards our identity. And so if the popularity, and we're constantly reading metrics, we're constantly listening on social, if people are wanting to go down that route and they're gravitating towards our helmet scheme, our designs, what we're going to be revealing shortly, our in-stadium designs, then we will be confident that we have made that decision together. And so there's always a chance.
What are some of the metrics that you're looking at? You mentioned social, and how are you measuring, what people are gravitating toward, what the fan vote really is?
Yeah, so we're using our social listening tools to measure things like sentiment around specific keywords and phrases related to some new themes or team names around, obviously, Washington football team, but then also the number of submissions that we get, and then really, some fun ones in terms of understanding the length and volume of some of those submissions, but then also clicks and time spent on our website to really understand how long people are taking to look through the journey and engage in the journey. And we have different webhooks on that site so that we understand the behavior. Again, so that part of that inclusive nature. So we're taking in all of that input as we then decide and show, evaluate what we show outward to the fans is something that they actually want to see.
I'm Janine Poggi, and I'm here with Marcus Stephenson of the Washington football team. And thanks to everyone watching at home. We have Cesar Lopez, Arab Hooley, Jared Mullis, Paul Carpenter, Robin Escalado, Emma, and Lucia Bueno. Thank you so much for tuning in. So, as you're thinking about all of this, how about the equity in the name and the brand right now that you do want to, retain color and things of that nature? How are you thinking about some of the stuff you don't want to let go?
Well, our burgundy and gold right now, that represents, that's something that's woven into the fabric of not just our franchise, but our community and our fandom, worldwide. And so that's something that, at our core, we wanted to establish right away with the new brand that, hey, this isn't going away. Now everything is up for discussion as it relates to the journey. But as we set forward in this new era, and then with this new brand look, we wanted to make sure that we retained those values from a color scheme perspective. Our legacy is very important for us. So you saw the helmet scheme with the numbers on the side. That's on purpose. We wanted to lean into that nostalgic aspect a little bit, but bring it more current. And that's where that's some of the things we've retained in order to, one, translate to our legacy fans who have been with us forever, to let them know we're never going to forget our legacy and it can never be erased. But then also, given this change that we all feel strongly about, and that it's very necessary for us to move forward, know that we are entering that new era, and that although we're retaining some of those things, the other elements, logo, name, are up for discussion as we evolve.
You mentioned, of course, retaining the loyalists, keeping some of the history of the team. What are the challenges in overcoming, both the criticism of the Redskins name while also retaining loyal fans who don't actually want the name team to change?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that, because I mentioned before that the legacy of the franchise is important, and our legacy wouldn't be here without our fans. And so the fans that really were attached to the previous name for so many years, we've maintained an open dialogue with them. And then our proof point is obviously WashingtonJourney.com, but through email, through podcast appearances, through our fan ambassador group. We're making sure that we're hearing them and listening to them as we delicately evolve. Because, and I use delicately, important, that's an important word here, is because it wouldn't be that inclusive journey if we weren't really paying attention to every step along the way. And so we're not just going to bullishly put something out and then not take the feedback and then bullishly put something out again. Every single step, we are evaluating the feedback through, metrics, but then also real conversations, and to help really better inform where our next step goes. So while we do have an overarching plan, don't get me wrong, it's filled with milestones. But in between those milestones, it's an open discussion. And that's why when I say it's an inclusive journey, we don't know where we're ultimately going to end up yet, but that's really the beauty of it, because if we did, then I don't think we'd be having this discussion.
Right. And just remind me what the time frame is on the rebrand. What phase are we in, and when are you expected for it to be complete?
Well, the time is as long as it takes, and I'm sorry to be generic there, but we want, we've been around for almost 100 years, and so when we think about that, this type of a decision can't be made overnight. And when we bring our fans along and our partners and our community along on this journey, it's going to take time to settle on the right decision, and one that all of us are happy with. Because we're shaping an identity here again. And so as we move forward, I can't say exactly when, because we don't know where this is ultimately going to evolve. But right now we are the Washington football team. We've seen a lot of sentiment that is starting to really come around in support of that brand. And as we move forward, we'll continue to gauge and really ultimately get towards an endpoint.
Let's talk a little bit about the interim name. I have a question from Jared. Did you guys pick Washington football team because someone purchased the other potential trademark names that were being considered?
That's a good question. No, that wasn't in the discussion at all. It really truly was. We didn't want to make this decision overnight. When we announced that we were going to go through an evaluation of our name, and then ultimately that we were going to change the name, we made sure that, again, we had discussions literally every single day, 24 hours a day, and we settled on, look, this is an opportunity for us to be inclusive, and we want to do it the right way. So no, it really had nothing to do with the trademark filings, but we saw all of that out there as you guys were talking about it.
So you mentioned inclusivity a few times, in this conversation. This week, more big news. Jason Wright was the first Black president of the team. Can you talk about this hire, and so in terms of, the moving forward and the rebrand of the team?
We are so excited to have Jason as a part of our franchise and leading our franchise on the business side. He is someone who has carved out a history of really focusing on culture and inclusivity at every organization he's ever been at, most recently at McKinsey. And moving forward, he's going to step right in, and part of this journey that we're discussing here, it really echoes everything he's been saying over the past few days once we announced his appointment. So I couldn't personally be more excited, because while this is an unusual year with COVID and some of the limitations that fans are going to ultimately be able to experience with us in stadium and on the field, Jason coming aboard is really going to turn the notch up a little bit from a fan engagement perspective. So that's a core focus as we move forward. So we're really excited.
We have a question from Lauren on Long Island. What will be the ultimate criteria to validate the winning concept, and what is the NFL level of input on it?
So we're in constant conversations with the league ultimately about where this evolution takes shape. Lauren, the criteria is being carved out based on some of the responses that we're receiving on WashingtonJourney.com, those metrics I talked about earlier, but then ultimately, there will be a validation point where we all can, both, I guess, digitally, but then also understand fully how we can look at one another from a fan, partner, league level, and then also community level, that we've made the right decision. So that the criteria, while it might seem loose right now, it's just because we're in the infancy stage of it, and we're in the gather period where we're gathering as much from you, frankly, that we can right now.
At what point will those submissions be closed? Is there an end date for when you will stop making submissions?
I'm sure the submissions will close at some point, but right now there's no end point, because there's no end point to when this decision will be made. So what we're looking forward to with WashingtonJourney.com is once this decision is made and we're all happy with this decision collectively, the website's going to serve as almost a museum. That again, I said earlier, we've been around for about 100 years. This is going to serve as the museum for the next 100 years. So you can see how long this process took and how delicately and important we took it.
Gotcha. We have another question from Brian. Gap famously tried to crowdsource their brand design. That didn't work so well with them. What are you doing to avoid a similar fate?
I think that part of that, Brian, thanks for that. Part of that is the passion from really you guys as fans. And what you're doing is you're taking this as seriously as we are. And we've already seen with the submissions on WashingtonJourney.com how seriously you're taking it. And so we see the common names out there, and that's a proof point for us. That's validation on the serious nature that fans are taking it. So we're not worried about that, really hitting us, because again, it's not just us internally, and it's not just fans, but it's all of us together. And so and that's the whole point of the destination, is because when we put ourselves out there and we show you how it's evolving and you give input back and forth, now it's a mutually agreed upon decision that we're moving forward together.
What are some of the early challenges you've run into in establishing a new trademark?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear that question.
What are some of the early challenges that you faced so far in establishing the new brand?
I think that there haven't been really any challenges per se, because we're going slowly, right? And so we're taking our time methodically. So trademark wise, we really haven't hit any challenges, because we were very quickly able to have this current brand, Washington Football Team, and established 1932. That came organically for us as we knew the journey we were about to roll out. So we really haven't hit any snags there at all.
Okay. Can you discuss, there was the incident with the 1932
Yes.
that didn't necessarily work out great, but can you talk about a little bit about what happened there?
Yeah, so we had a really big surprise planned, and unfortunately it worked out the right way, because when we first announced that we were going to the Washington Football Team brand established 1932, Twitter and the league actually asked for a hashtag. It's much more than just a social media hashtag. It denotes your brand. It denotes your identity that the league and Twitter, social media ultimately looks out for. And so we had come up with 1932 to ultimately own that year, given the establishment of the franchise. We fully knew that it was not, you can't have numbers in a hashtag, which is why we were so excited, because we were talking with Twitter to have that exclusivity. So we would be the only team in the league that had an exclusive number hashtag. Unfortunately for us, we got ahead of ourselves, and before it was actually going to be turned on, it was tweeted out. Okay, and then that happened without everybody really understanding and knowing the surprise element of the backstory. But then again, seeing the response outside of the snafu with the number, it allowed us to really check ourselves, because we're rolling out WashingtonJourney.com, and when we do something like that, why don't we go? Although we made the decision before we rolled out WashingtonJourney.com, why don't we bring this into it? Why don't we let fans and our community help come up with what that hashtag is? And so it is kind of a blessing in disguise, but that is the backstory behind the hashtag. Is we fully knew, but the surprise was really ruined right there.
So are you still in the process of establishing a new hashtag? Is that something that fans are also working on establishing and helping you guys decide?
Absolutely, and that's something you should expect to see on the destination for sure moving forward.
Is there any time frame on that coming anytime soon?
Not within the next month or so, but that is something that in our plans we're going to get to sooner rather than later, because obviously as we get into the season, we want that to be something that we're really excited about as it relates to the Washington Football Team brand.
So what are you currently using to sort of cultivate, that conversation on Twitter and other social platforms?
Right now, the really long hashtag Washington Football Team. So we know that is not going to be right, or that's going to last too long, which is why we want to get ahead of it really quickly.
Gotcha. So the team also announced last week that it will not play in front of fans this season, of course, due to COVID-19. So how is the organization rethinking marketing to adjust to the fact that there won't be any fans in the stadium? You know, you did mention the idea of the signage and you know, look of the stadium and that, you know, how are you dealing with that?
Yeah, so right now I'm in at the headquarters, and we're under a tiered structure to where we can't have contact, obviously, with different people in different tiers, and obviously holding to guidelines 10 feet apart from one another. We're all wearing masks. I'm in my office with the door closed, by the way, but we all have these contact tracer bracelets, and that allows us to, whenever we're near anybody else in a different tier, it is the loudest sound you've ever heard in your life that warns you to get away from that person. And so we feel really good about where we're at internally from a business perspective. From a fan engagement and then ultimately marketing and programming perspective, well, you're talking to the digital guy. So, I mean, for me, this is in a way, while it's not the best scenario for fans, we're really able to capture as many eyeballs as we can on our programming efforts, which are all going to have an element of inclusivity and interactivity as we move forward into the season. So access, we know you're going to want access. We know you're going to want to relate to our players in a way that you never have before. And so our slew of programming that we're going to be revealing over the next few days really is going to allow us to take advantage of the unfortunate situation that we're all in right now.
The NBA, of course, did some interesting things in terms of how they're getting fans, you know, through AR, that stuff into the stadiums. Are those things that you guys are thinking about, or how you're thinking about putting digital and viewing online, you know, into the stadiums?
Absolutely. The NBA really did. They went above and beyond, and they allowed us to take a look and take some of our existing plans and then turn them up a notch as well. And so what we're going to be able to do is offer different camera angles in stadium, access points for you through digital channels. Some of the fan inclusion via the virtual signage that you would, or the video boards that you see with the NBA. Those are things that we're exploring right now. Every day is so important as we get to kickoff the second week of September. So I would expect that you will see something very similar, but then also, you know, something that really makes sense for our franchise and ultimately the NFL as we move forward. But yes, we're absolutely exploring and fully planning on rolling those out.
And are you out to talking about different sponsorship opportunities? And of course, for brands, you know, that's the hard part as well, as losing sort of that marketing sponsorships in stadium and in person. You know, how are you talking to brands right now about that?
Yeah, I'll tell you what, that's been an interesting evolution for us, because as you would know, you know, us being really digital marketers here, we know that we can capture attentions in a different way than you can in stadium through more traditional inventory. But the way we're thinking about it is we're focusing on our metrics and the behaviors of the individuals who are consuming our content and consuming our programming, and then making sure that aligns to the different sponsors' objectives. So we've had a lot of success thus far with some of our virtual programming that we started all the way at the beginning of the NFL draft in April, and then into our schedule release, and then ultimately what we're doing here in training camp with Training Camp Live. We have 2 full digital shows every single day during training camp, one in the morning and one in the afternoon at what we call happy hour. And sponsors right now are getting integrated into that programming, and they're really enjoying some of the, not only the sentiment but the performance of that programming. So we feel very encouraged about where we're headed there.
We have a question from Paul. What are some other digital experiences you are developing beyond the WashingtonJourney.com to help build a new era of fan engagement?
Yeah, I love that question. So it's going to stem from that destination, Paul. But there you'll see extensions. You'll see ambassador groups come out of that. You'll see influencer groups. You'll see roundtables. I can't give you specifics because that would be revealing too much of our plan. But you should expect some of those extensions. And then there's our programming efforts. No longer are we just going to have digital or linear television or digital shows that really just focus on-field football coverage. We're really tapping into the cultural extensions of the brand food, fashion, entertainment, gaming, fitness, lifestyle, and pop culture. And you're going to see very shortly, within the next few weeks, of the brand we're rolling out called Unfiltered, which we'll be focusing on all those elements and bringing in fans and influencers to take part of that programming, so that we're all really, when we're not leading the conversation, we're part of the conversation that happens every day that you see on social media and in the blogosphere of life, really.
We talked a little bit about the colors and the importance of that. We have a question from John. With the change in brand name logo, are you also considering a change in colors to distance from the old name?
John, thanks for the question. I think that for where we are right now, the burgundy and gold is very important to us. Now, given where we are with the journey that we're moving forward on, that's when I say that's up for discussion, I mean, because as transparent as possible as we can be, which is 100%. I can't say that the colors will or won't remain, because right now we've made a conscientious choice to keep them. But if I said that we would change them, that wouldn't be really fair for the journey. So right now our plan is to keep them because it represents much more than just our history, but more the identity of who we are, and that was shaped by our community. But where we move forward, very transparently, that's really gonna depend on what we all as our fans, our partners, and then ultimately our community feel as we move forward. But we are the burgundy and gold.
We have a few comments. We have one from Paul. Even as a lifelong Falcons fan, I'm extremely impressed with what you're doing for your team. I'm rooting for you in this incredibly hard exercise.
Oh, thanks, Paul. Appreciate that.
And then we also have another comment from Brian. Thank you for responding to my question. Best of luck to you and your team on this journey. It's impossible to make everyone happy in any rebrand scenario. Appreciate your transparency. And I do want to talk about that, like making everyone happy and sort of, how you, in this kind of environment that you set up, sort of soliciting, help from fans, and there's obviously going to be differing opinions. How are you sort of managing those expectations from fans as well?
And that's the beauty of it is through consistent and constant dialogue through our programming, and then our non-digital channels, that just good old-fashioned conversations. But the beauty of the journey is that if we open up our process and we bring you along in to have input in that process, then we know that not everyone is going to be happy. It isn't possible to make everyone happy. But at the same time, if we include you in the process, you understand how and why the decisions are made. And that's really, really good for us, because that is ultimate transparency. You may not be happy with today or tomorrow, but at some point you are going to understand, based on what your peers as fans are thinking and what you then are learning. And then at that point, that can shape your overall temperament of what you're thinking, because we are being so upfront and open with what we are doing.
And before we go, obviously there is lots of anticipation, and everyone's paying attention to how exactly the NFL season would start. Of course, with COVID, everyone is watching carefully of the safety measures and how things will actually kick off, and if the NFL will be able to even play an entire season. What can you give us any insight into sort of the conversations you guys are having over there about how you're proceeding and contingency plans and things like that?
Yeah, so I mean, we are tested constantly right now, and we feel very good about that. The safety of our employees and then our team is of the utmost importance as we move forward. Like I said, we're going to start the season with no fans in the stadium, so that really allows us to focus on those contingency plans right now. And then as we move forward, we're taking the necessary steps of thinking about how our radio and television broadcast is going to look. We're going to simulcast this year on the radio, and then open it up via digital video stream, so you can see what's going on in the radio booth during the game. And so we are preparing for every single scenario as it relates to COVID. And we feel really, really good about where we're going there. But it is, honestly, it is a week by week, day by day journey. I don't mean to use that as a pun given our discussion, but it is something that we are planning for, that we have plans in place both at the league and franchise level. But our testing ultimately is of the utmost importance, and where that lands and where we evaluate and see that on a day-by-day basis, because we need to look at our dashboard. We need to look at all the data that is informing our decision making, so we're making the right decision related to this pandemic that we can.
Right. Thank you, Marcus, for joining us. Be safe.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks for having me. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate the questions.
Thanks for everyone for tuning in. And as always, thank you to our Ad Age crew, Alfred Mascaroni, Anna Sakula, Max Sternlicht, and Elise Liffring for making this live stream happen. Thanks, everyone.